Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to the Suburban Proletarian. My name's Greg, and today I want to take a quick look at a new watch I just got in. It's a brand new watch, but it's also a little bit more than 50 years old. When I say it's brand new, I mean that it's brand new. It still has the sticker intact on the case back. It's never been worn outside of the showroom of a watch dealer. No scratches whatsoever, absolutely mint condition, gold plating still perfectly intact. In that time period in the late 60s and early 70s, when the quartz revolution was absolutely laying waste to the Swiss traditional watch industry, it also managed to kill a lot of little mom and pop watch shops that specialized in traditional mechanical Swiss watches. Now, some of those almost certainly sold off their inventory in some sort of a fire sale when they closed. But other places literally just closed up shop, shuttered their windows, locked their doors, threw the key away, and walked away from the business. And there are tons and tons of new old stock watches, a lot of them from this time period, the 1960s into the early 1970s, that have literally been sitting on shelves or in storerooms in their original packaging sometimes, or original boxes, just waiting for somebody to come along and buy them. And people like the guy I bought this watch from are now sort of mining these stocks of old brand new watches and selling them on places like eBay or Etsy. I happen to buy this particular one on eBay. But the watch we're taking a look at today is a man's dress watch made by a company called Marvin. Marvin is not very well known today, but at one point in time, Marvin was a pretty heavy hitter. In the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, you could find Marvin watches on the wrists of some pretty famous celebrities. Probably the ultimate hero of would-be suburban proletarians everywhere, thanks to the Gap splattering his face on the front of a t-shirt. Marxist, freedom fighter, peasant, luxury goods enthusiast. Of course, I'm talking about Che Guevara. Now, when it comes to watches, Che Guevara is most famous for being a Rolex aficionado. He owned several Rolexes, I think an early Submariner and maybe a GMT Master. But he did own a Marvin as well, and that Marvin is still on display somewhere in a museum exhibit with some of his other effects. Another rags to riches story, Norma Jean had herself a Marvin. Just last year, Julian's Auction House in Los Angeles sold off a couple of Marilyn Monroe's watches, both of which had been bequeathed to Lee Strasberg upon her death. The Lee Strasberg estate sold off the watches last year. One of them was a diamond-encrusted cocktail watch from Blancpain, which sold for an ungodly $225,000. The second watch was an equally diamond-encrusted cocktail watch, but it was built around a Marvin movement and case. I think that was not actually a Marvin watch. It was made by a jeweler, but it was a Marvin nonetheless. And the Didesheim family, who founded Marvin and operated the company right up through the 1960s, were great fans and sponsors of motorsport, particularly Formula One. They manufactured award watches for the winners of the Grand Prix for many years, and their first corporate brand sponsor was Argentinian-born Formula One legend Juan Manuel Fangio. Other Formula One drivers like Alberto Ascari and Sterling Moss also famously wore Marvin watches. So Marvin was a pretty significant watch company in its day. So in my renewed interest of keeping these intros a little bit shorter, that's probably enough backstory. Let's go over to the tabletop and take a closer look at this particular watch. Alright guys, so here it is. Let's take a bit closer look at it. I mean, the first thing you'll notice about the watch is it is absolutely perfectly brand new, including the sticker on the back of the case. The strap, I believe, is an aftermarket modern job. I don't know if this was a watch that was shipped as a head only and was meant to be fitted with a strap at the end retailer, or if the original strap dry rotted and crumbled, but you can see this is clearly a new reproduction strap, although a very nice quality one. Aside from its condition, the most striking thing about the watch is this funky 1960s design aesthetic. It is a tonneau-shaped case, but unlike the tonneau case on this Orient TriStar, for instance, it's transverse. Matter of fact, the dimensions are very similar between these two watches. It's just that this watch is turned sideways to the more traditional vertical alignment. The other thing you'll notice immediately about this watch is that it's just a two-hand watch. I like a second hand. Not only does it allow you to keep track of the exact speed of the watch, I have certain jobs that I perform at work, tasks that I perform at work that need to be timed, tests and samples that need to be taken and timed. So I like having a second hand. Even when you don't have a chronograph, it allows you to mark 1 or 2 minutes off. But clearly, I mean, even if expensive watches like the Cartier Tank are any example, there are a lot of very successful people who can afford really much more expensive and exclusive watches than this one, who really could not care less what the exact second of the day is. Two-hand watches have been around for a very, very long time, and some of the most expensive dress watches today are still made with only two hands. And I haven't been wearing this watch. I've been wanting to keep it perfect for this review. Plus, it turns out it's not really my style, which I'll go over in a moment. But I have wound it a bit. It should probably be serviced. That's one thing to keep in mind with these new old stock watches. Just because it's brand new, just because it's never really been used, doesn't mean that the oil inside it hasn't all dried up. If you want a new old stock watch like this one to run reliably, the first thing you should do when you get it, before using it significantly, would be to take it to your local watchmaker and get it properly serviced. Having said that, and although I haven't worn it, I have wound it up a bit, and I've run it for a couple of days, and as near as I can get with the Watch Check app, I get the impression that this watch is running about 30 to 40 seconds fast per day. That's about as close as I can get. But, I mean, certainly well within reasonable accuracy. But when you've grown quite accustomed, as I have, to seeing that second hand very visibly sweeping around the dial, the hands on a two-hand watch almost seem to be static, and it can create an illusion that time is standing still. On the other hand, once you really start focusing on that minute hand, and you start to see that it actually is moving, the whole dial becomes much more dynamic. I never really noticed the movement of the minute hands on any of my watches until I stared at this watch. I can't hold it still enough for you to see it moving. Although you saw both of the hands moving in the time-lapse segment in the intro to this video. But it's interesting. I haven't owned a two-hand watch in a long time, and they're not really my style. I'm starting to wonder why I even bought this watch, other than the fact that I thought I needed a classic vintage dress watch, and Marvin seemed like a respectable enough brand to go for, and the price was right. But as much as this watch doesn't fit me, and it really doesn't, although I've worn this Orient quite a bit, and the dimensions are nearly identical, and I looked at this thing on paper. It's 36 millimeters wide, the case width. It's about 38 millimeters lug to lug. It has a very respectable 20 millimeter lug width. It just ends up looking very effeminate on my hand. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just too elegant. I don't know if it's because it's gold. It looks very small on my wrist. And my wife has taken a shine to it. She actually laughed at me when she saw me trying it on and said it looked like a woman's watch, and then, of course, allowed as how she wouldn't mind wearing it. So I think this is going to end up being my wife's watch. But it's been an interesting experiment. I've given the dimensions It does have a press-on case back. The case back is signed with the Marvin crown, Swiss, the model number there, which is 534304. The crown is also signed with the Marvin crown. Let's turn that so you can see it. And of course the dial has the Marvin crown. It is hand winding, and it has a very respectable 17 joule movement in it. I don't have a clean room in my house. I'm not going to pop the case back. That's not to say we don't clean our house, but it is to say that we have 2 humans living here, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and unless I need to work on a watch, I'm not going to remove the back and risk getting hair inside of it. So it is a pop-off or a press-fit case back, but I'll throw up a photograph right here of the movement. As I've already said, it is the Marvin 525, and it was not only manufactured by Marvin and used by Marvin, it was also sold to and used by Zenith and Movado in the original museum watch, as well as some other watches. I say the original museum watch, but in fact, the original museum watch I don't think was made by Zenith Movado. I think it was made by LeCoultre maybe, but Zenith Movado are the ones who really made a name with the museum watch. Anyway, you can see in the photograph there's some nice damascening on the bridge. I don't know if you'd actually call it proper Côte de Genève since it only has 2 bands of damascening. You can see the dividing line running right through the model number and the jewel count. And it has some other proper Swiss watch features to it. You can see the Marvin name and the model number and the jewel count on the bridge, as well as the regulation marks on the balance cock are deeply carved and properly filled with gold paint. And that's the cool thing about buying an old vintage watch like this. That work was not done by robots like it would be done today. The final assembly was done by guys in white lab coats, and the manufacture of the movement and all of that brilliant machining was done by folks in leather aprons with jeweler's loops. So, I mean, I didn't pay a whole lot for this watch, but it's amazing that in this day and age, you can buy a really classic vintage Swiss watch. Now, of course, the really, really desirable watches got sold a long time ago. You're going to end up with some sort of oddball watches, much like this one. But it's still really cool to be able to buy a vintage watch in essentially brand new condition and wear it and have something that's really, really unique. Again, I can't stress enough, even though these watches are new, if you buy new old stock, 50 years old, take it to your watchmaker, spend $60. I mean, this is an 17 jewel movement. It's not going to cost a lot and very straightforward, and it's in perfect condition. It shouldn't need any parts replaced. To have it cleaned and lubricated really isn't going to cost you much. 50, $60, and you'll be good for 10 years worth of use. So if you're going to buy new old stock, take care of it the way you would any old watch. I guess I don't really have an awful lot more to say about this. I just thought it was kind of cool. And Christmas is right around the corner, so this is going to be one of my wife's stocking stuffers. But just a neat watch. And since it didn't fit me and it doesn't really suit my style, I think you'll probably be seeing another new old stock vintage watch in the very near future. Let's go back over to the bookcases and wrap this up. Alright guys, so that was just a quick look at the Marvin Model 534304. It's a neat little watch, very elegant. It's a little too elegant for me. It looks a little too effeminate on my wrist, but my loss is my wife's gain. I didn't pay an awful lot for this, and I think it was a neat buy, even though I'm not going to be able to wear it. I think it's just interesting that you can still, if you know where to look, buy 50-year-old watches that are in essentially brand new condition. So if you want more information about that, please go ahead and comment down below. I'd be happy to do a video about new old stock watches and how to track them down. But you probably have more fun tracking them down on your own. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and click the like button down below. If you did like it and you'd like to see more like it, please consider subscribing to the channel. It only takes a fraction of a second. It doesn't cost anything, and it goes a long way to help keep me here on the air. And if you're already a subscriber, click the little bell icon down below. That'll allow YouTube to send you notifications when I post updates to the channel. And when I do that, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.